So this week, as we discuss the rich get richer and the poor get prison, there's a section on page 44 that kind of gives a good summarization as to what I got from this chapter, this first section. It says that poverty and inequality, warehouse prisons, drug policy emphasizing criminalization, and lack of gun control are areas where our policies make crime more likely because of how they shape families, communities, and individual choices. This alone gives a big picture view of what happens when there are a lot of things that are factoring into someone's life and there are no solutions coming out of it. When you have an impoverished neighborhood or you have crime that happens all around a person, they have a higher risk of getting involved because there are no solutions to any of the problems that they face on a daily basis. The book discusses how when a person commits a crime, usually the first thing we do is we look at the crime itself and we say, this was a bad crime. What was their motive? But we don't actually go back and try to solve or bring a solution to the social problem that's actually happening. You may not have a better solution if you have no money in your household. So selling drugs may be the first thing that you do. But the policies are so strict, and what we've seen throughout the chapter, especially with a lot of the administrations, the presidential administrations, is we're going to be tough on crime. We're going to get these people off of the street, but we're not going to eliminate the problems in the neighborhoods that are causing people to turn to drugs, cause them to turn to even white collar crime. The book discussed that some too. Another section that was pretty big for me was talking about the non-criminal justice factors, those things that we don't necessarily see on paper, and how it affects one generation to the next generation. And you have those sellers. So it says an old seller is taken off the street. The drug market is not going to dissipate at that point. You have the younger people who are coming under that person because there are no other positive influences that they can look to other than the man on the street who takes care of his family and takes care of those who are with him. And unfortunately, it works. And there are no other things, no alternatives to that because the policies are trying to get them off. We're not trying to figure out how we can make sure that we replace the influence they have in the community because they're going to be looking for, especially children are going to be looking for someone to fill in that void. And if it happens to be somebody that is in the same situation, more than likely they're going to follow that lead and attach themselves to that person. So focusing on the excuses that the book gave as far as one being we're too soft, there's a cost to modern life, and we blame it on kids, and on from there. Those excuses are things that go to the beginning of the chapter where it speaks on how people take the credit when things are going good. And then if things are not going good, they're more than likely going to say, well, that was somebody else's fault. Because on paper, if the numbers look good and we have a lower crime rate, of course, yes, these policies are really working. Or the police may say, because we are in the community and they see us all the time, we're helping. When in reality, it's causing the problem to remain consistent. The numbers might not be as high, but they're still an issue if we're still having to result to putting people in prison just to keep them off the streets, or we're having to add more police. That's contributing to the problem. One of the things that it focused on was guns, where it was discussing how people who have access to guns are more likely to commit a crime. But then how likely is it that if a person does not have a gun, but they're in a desperate situation, that they're not going to go to another measure to make sure that they get what they need? On page 39, it says, can we really believe that if guns were less available, violent criminals would simply switch over to another weapon to commit the same number of crimes and do the same amount of damage? I'm not going to bring a knife to a gunfight if I know that my gun is going to get to the person quicker and solve what I need done, and I can leave and there be no trace of it. Another big thing that I saw was, what if things were different and we said, instead of making such a huge deal and criminalizing people, what happens when we decriminalize drugs? And on page 20, it says we would be better off decriminalizing drugs, taxing their production and sale, and expanding treatment and public health initiatives. Let's talk about what's happening now in the world, where you do have the marijuana that's becoming legal in a lot of states, and they are benefiting, the world is benefiting from the sales of these drugs, that now that they're done legally, we can tax them, we can widespread the production of it. And you still got people in prison for something that was illegal just 2-3 years ago and was deemed, especially by the labeling theory, this was deemed by society to be something that we do not want to happen. Well, it became more prevalent in society, and people started accepting it more. So now we're going to make it legal and we're going to benefit from it. Which brings us to the issue of, how do we reverse a lot of these policies that have been set in place for decades? Even back to like the Clinton administration, where we're going to get tough on drugs and the war on drugs. Then once he was out of the administration, the next person that comes along doesn't necessarily have to do that, and their focus changes and the issues change. They're different. The climate is different. So pretty much what I got from this is, we can say as much as we want to that the rates have changed, there's less crime, but we still have major issues that have yet to be resolved, and there is no policy that is going back to those things and saying, hey, let's correct the whole situation, as opposed to, let me fix the reputation of, we criminalize so many Black males, for example, but you're not going back into the communities that were damaged because of the police coming through and locking up a lot of those people, and then the families are still impoverished and they still don't have access to the materials that they need to survive. So those are just some things that I kind of thought on, and I can't wait to get the rest of the discussion from the rest of the class. Thank you.